Let's spend some time looking at the specifics of the summit and what will come out of it. Give us a sense of some of the areas being considered and some of the treaties to be considered.
Well, there are a number of expected declarations and agreements to be adopted. First, there are these two treaties which we've been talking about. One is to stem global warming, which threatens to raise sea levels and change agricultural production drastically, creating a large number of environmental refugees. They're something we have to do something about now in order to prevent that kind of catastrophe in the future. Additionally, there's this biodiversity treaty which set out to protect areas of high biological diversity. This is essential not only to keep ecosystems healthy in this world, but also for our own medicinal and agricultural needs. These places are really the storehouses for future agricultural and medicine. So today we can't even imagine. We've only cataloged a very, very small percentage of the world's existing biodiversity. There's also an enormous document called Agenda 21, which is a blueprint for the next century. It's some 1,000 pages and has a series of recommendations for each program area. There are 115 program areas, and as you can imagine, encompasses just about every environment and also cross-cutting development issues such as trade and integration of environmental development decision-making, financing, technical cooperation. In addition to that document, there are two other products that are expected to be adopted in Rio. One is the Rio Declaration, which was meant to be an Earth Charter, a shorter, more inspirational piece. It's largely a political statement of the respective responsibilities between countries in the North and countries in the South on this range of environment and development issues. Additionally, there is a set of forest principles which right now in UN parlance is heavily bracketed. That means that its fate is uncertain and it may not in fact survive the negotiations next week. Those are sort of the major agreements that will be adopted. We're hoping that countries will come to the table with strong unilateral declarations. As you know, the climate treaty that was adopted fails to really make any specific commitments for reducing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. The Europeans and Japanese have long advocated at least a first step of stabilizing those emissions at 1990 levels to prevent their growth by the year 2000. We're expecting them to come to the table and say, again, we will go ahead. Even if the U.S. will not join the party, we will go ahead with those measures. Additionally, the French have announced that they will stop nuclear testing in the Pacific. It's a tremendously important step. Malaysia is apparently perched to announce that it will protect 50% of its remaining forests. So we're hoping that governments will come to the table with announcements about what they plan to do. We had recommendations last week for the head of the preparatory delegation, Buff Bolin, at the State Department. We said, why don't you reverse the administration's announcement about our primary forest, the God Squad decision. Why don't you reverse the decision about gutting the Clean Air Act permit requirements, a number of things back home that would show that we were serious about setting an example for the rest of the world. Of course, he sort of chuckled and said, can you come up with something a little bit easier to do? Anyway, that's sort of the range of issues. Of course, as I said, this has been 2 years of negotiations, so that's what we're expecting a week before the summit, but I think, in fact, when the heads of state arrive, they may have something else up their sleeves to talk with the public about.
Mr. Train, some critics have said that these agreements have been watered down to the point of being meaningless. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's true. I think of the Global Climate Convention, we certainly would have preferred to see a convention with specific commitments that were measurable and which you could monitor compliance against. But the U.S. objected to that, and what we have is a convention which I think is a positive first step, but I'd emphasize it's a first step. And first steps in an area as complicated as this, I don't think one should expect too much. And there is a commitment by governments, at least as I read the convention, to move toward stabilizing at 1990 levels. And I think, and there's a process there for the parties to the convention meeting every 6 months and reporting on how they're doing. And there's a review process. And I think this is will turn into an action-forcing mechanism. And then, again, here at home, I think the public, private organizations such as ours bear a big responsibility for keeping our own government feet to the fire. So I think a combination of aroused public concern, interest, and the convention should permit us to get on with the job. I think it's a positive step. Important things we have to do, I think, particularly in the near term, is to develop environmentally beneficial, benign, non-polluting, if you will, technologies. I'm thinking primarily in the energy area, move us away from reliance on fossil fuels, and also in the transportation area. These are the two enormous problems insofar as the environment is concerned. And you take today's technologies in energy and transportation and double the number of people in the world and raise everybody's standard of living so they can live exactly like we do. The result is an impossibility, obviously.